Hey everybody, and welcome to Lesson 16, Empathize with Characters. Now, I hope everyone is doing great right now. I miss seeing all of you, but this is what we're going to have to do for right now until we can all be together again. Now, before I get going, I just want to make sure everyone's staying healthy. Wash your hands. Know how that goes. 20 seconds. Make sure you're sneezing into your elbows. And also make sure that if you need to go out, that you protect yourself, okay? So, I'm not saying like it has here with Baby Yoda, with wearing a mask. If you don't feel well, don't go out. But if you do end up having to go out, listen to your parents, whatever they say to do. If they say wear one, wear one. If they say don't, don't. You don't always need it. So, here we go with Lesson 16, Empathizing with Characters. Now, we've talked a lot about empathy versus sympathy, okay? Both are good things. But I think empathy is really, really important. Okay, we've talked about why it's so important, and sometimes empathy might be better than sympathy. Okay, because empathy is when we can understand and we can share the feelings of another person. Now, we might not have gone through a situation like with this virus that's going around. Not everyone has had this virus. Okay, but we can empathize with that. We can understand that it can be kind of scary for some, okay? But we also have to realize, though, that while we can empathize with these people, we don't need to be afraid of people that have it or even be afraid in general. So, guys, stay strong and be courageous and don't be afraid right now because it's going to be okay. So, let's continue on and move on to the next slide. So far, we have examined two perspectives of life in the Dust Bowl and compared and contrasted author purpose and written response. So that's what you've been working on, and I know that I've been getting some questions, and I hope that those questions have been answered as we're going along with this, and I'm sure Miss Deschamps has been getting some questions too. So huge thanks to Miss Deschamps for starting us off and getting us going with these responses, okay? Now make sure that when you're writing these responses, one, you're writing them in your reading log, and two, you're taking those writings, okay, you're keeping them there so you can have them in there, but you're also attaching them into the Microsoft form that's in the description for these videos, okay? So if you haven't done that yet, go to the videos for 13, 14, and 15. All right, there should be links for those forms there, and make sure that you're doing that because that's going to be our way, Miss Deschamps and myself. It's going to be our way of making sure that y'all are kind of on track with where you're going, okay? Now, with this, you're going to have some more written responses, but that's okay because, again, we're going to keep up, we're going to keep going. Now, how are we going to keep going? Well, we're going to do three things in this lesson. First thing, we're going to read Autumn 1934 and part of Winter 1935. Second thing, we're going to examine how Billie Jo's tone helps us understand how her attitude changes. And then the third thing, okay, the third thing, which you're going to be writing down, is we're going to write a poem from Daddy's perspective. Now, don't you get scared, all right? You can do this. Very quickly, make sure that you have your copy of Out of the Dust. So some of you might have your book copy like this. Some of you do not, and that's okay because on the 6th grade Padlet, there is actually a link to an online PDF that Miss Deschamps found. So that's linked there. You can follow along with those there because all of the poems are on this PDF. Now, the second thing that you're going to need is your reading log. So make sure that you have those two things as well as a pencil, okay, as we're getting going today. Also, if you hear anything in the background, my mom is watching Riverdale. So if you can hear it, I'm sorry. So, first things first, we're going to read Autumn 1934. Now, before we get going with that, I want you to go ahead and get out your reading log, okay? So, pause the video right here, and I want you to get your reading log as well as whatever you're going to read those poems with and a pencil. So, pause here and then pick it back up. Okay, so you should have picked this back up, and I want you to go ahead and I want you to mark lesson 16 in here, all right? Now, for lesson 16, you're going to read each of these, all right? Now, each of these poems, I'm sorry, and you're going to answer these three questions. What is Billie Jo's tone? What text evidence supports your answer? And explain how your evidence supports your answer, okay? Now, I want you to start off with me as we're reading Hired Work. Now, in the book, it starts on page 87. So, follow along with me if you can, or just listen as I read this. My father hired on at Wireless Power on Tuesday, excavating for towers. He said, I'm good at digging, and everyone who knows about our hole knows he's telling the truth. He might as well earn a couple of dollars. It doesn't look good for the winter crop. Earning some cash will make him feel better. I don't think he'll drink it up. He hasn't done that since Ma. It's hard to believe that I once brought money in too, even if it was just a dime now and then, for playing piano. Now I can't hardly stay in the same room with one, especially Ma's. Now, that's the first poem to start us off with Autumn 1934. Now, when you're looking at Autumn 1934, again, I want you to keep in mind, what is Billie Jo's tone in this? Now remember, tone is simply the author's attitude towards the situation. So, to kind of help you with this, or to answer those questions, you can make a graph like this one here that goes with hard work, okay? So the answers in this graph actually go with hard work. Now, Billie Jo's tone in this poem is sad and depressed. Now, the first one that shows this, the first example of text evidence, comes from this. He hasn't done that since small, talking about Daddy's drinking. Now, the explanation is the sentence is unfinished. She is having trouble facing the fact that Ma's gone. All right, and another piece of text evidence that kind of helps that is down here at the bottom. Now, I can't hardly stay in the same room with one, especially Ma's. Now, she used to love the piano, but right now Billie Jo can't really play it because her hands are messed up, okay? So it's hard for her to go into that room, okay, to play on Ma's piano, because if you remember, Ma was really talented, okay? Ma was the only one that could calm Daddy down after a long, hard day, all right? So that's another one that's shown she's sad and depressed because of all that's going on. Now, I want you to go ahead and I want you to read the rest of this chapter. All right, I'm also going to be posting a link to the read-along version that you can. And I want you to take some time, pause the video here because I'm about to move on, but pause the video here, finish reading the chapter, take those notes, because answering these questions for each of those is going to help us realize what's the overall tone for this chapter. So, again, pause this video, read the rest of Autumn 1934, and then be ready to move on. Alright, I'm getting a little comfy now after reading Autumn 1934, and as we're going into this discussion over it. Now, we can't really have a discussion because I'm not there for you to talk to me back and forth. You can see me here, but I can't really see you right now. Now, here's the question I want you to be thinking about. How could we describe the overall tone of the speaker for the poems in this chapter? Now, look back and see what you put for each of these poems. Is there a common tone that is showing up, like a strong emotion? Is Billie Jo sad? Is she depressed? Is she maybe disappointed a lot? Alright, think about different circumstances. Think about whenever she's playing the piano. She does get a little bit of relief, but overall, does that relief last? Now, I want you to go ahead and I want you to pause the video and I want you to stop and I want you to think about what you want to put for your answer here. So go ahead and pause this video. I'm going to pause it too. And I want you to stop and I want you to think about it. Now that you've had the chance to really think about this, I want you to go ahead and copy down this sentence stem that I have for you. Okay? Now, again, the overall tone of Billie Jo in Autumn 1934 is, and then choose your answer. Press pause, copy the sentence stem down, and then what I want you to do is put your answer in there. Alright? Press pause, and when you're ready to move on to the next thing, go ahead. Alright, you should be getting ready to read the first 6 poems from winter 1935. Now, before you start going with this, go ahead and put first 6 poems from winter 1935, and then I want you to have these 2 questions written down, or just have it ready to answer these questions. How is Billie Jo feeling, and what are the predominant sources of pain for her? Now, predominant is a way of saying, what are the main sources of pain? Okay, what feelings, what interactions are causing her to have the most, maybe, emotional pain as well as physical, because remember, she's hurting pretty bad right now. Now, the first poem you will be reading is State Test again. Sorry, little word flop there. Second one is Christmas Dinner Without the Cranberry Sauce, Driving the Cows, First Rain, Hayden Peni, and then finally Scrubbing Up Dust. So go ahead, read those poems, okay, and then answer these questions. Pause the video. Once you finish reading those 6 poems from winter 1935, press play, Alright, and we will move on to the next slide. Alright, you should have read the first 6 poems of Winter 1935. You should have answered those 2 questions, and now you're ready to talk about Outlined by Dust, okay? Now, Outlined by Dust is the 7th poem in Winter 1935, okay, or the 7th song in our playlist. Now, when I read through this, okay, or as I'm reading through this, answer these questions. What does Billie Joe discover about herself, and which lines in the poem contain evidence for your answer? So go ahead, listen along, or you can pause it after we do it. It's however you want to do. But here we go. I'll read it for you. My father stares at me while I sit across from him at the table. While I wash dishes in the basin, my back to him, the picked and festered bits of my hands in agony. He stares at me as I empty the wash water at the roots of Ma's apple trees. He spends long days digging for the electric train folks when they can use him, or working here, nursing along the wheat, what there is of it, or digging the pond. He sings sometimes under his breath, even now, even after so much sorrow. He sings a man's song, deep with what has happened to us. It doesn't swing lightly, the way Ma's voice did, the way Miss Freeland's voice does, the way Mad Dog sings. My father's voice starts and stops, like a car short of gas, like an engine choked with dust, but then he clears his throat, and the song starts up again. He rubs his eyes the way I do, with his palms out. Ma never did that. And he wipes the milk from his upper lip, same as me, with his thumb and forefinger. Ma never did that either. We don't talk much. My father never was a talker. Ma's dying hasn't changed that. I guess he gets this sound out of him with the song he sings. I can't help thinking how it is for him without Ma. Waking up alone, only his shape left in the bed, outlined by dust. He always smelled a little like her, first thing in the morning, when he left her in the bed and went out to do the milking. She'd scuff into the kitchen a few minutes later, bleary-eyed, to start breakfast. I don't think she was ever really meant for farm life. I think once she had bigger dreams, but she made herself over to fit my father. Now he smells of dust and coffee, tobacco and cows. None of the musky woman smell left that was Ma. He stares at me. Maybe he's looking for Ma. He won't find her. I look like him. I stand like him. I walk across the kitchen floor with that long-legged walk of his. I can't make myself over the way Ma did. And yet, if I could look in the mirror and see her in my face, if I could somehow know that Ma and baby Franklin lived on in me. But it can't be. I'm my father's daughter. January 1935. That's a hard one. Billie Joe's dealing with a lot in that. So I want you to answer these questions. What does Billie Joe discover about herself? Which lines in the poem contain evidence for your answers? And to kind of help you along with that, look at the parts where she's talking about Daddy and she's comparing herself to her father. Okay, that's where she's really kind of noticing herself and how she's similar to him. So again, pay very close attention to that. Pause this video, write down your answers, press play when you're ready to move on. Moving on, let's talk about nostalgia. Now, nostalgia, as defined here as a noun, is a wistful desire to return in thought or in fact to a former time in one's life, or to one's family or friends, a sentimental yearning for the happiness of a former time. Now, the adjective version of this is nostalgic. And some of us right now might be feeling nostalgic for when toilet paper wasn't so hard to find, or for when we could actually see each other face to face, or when we could actually hug each other without people getting concerned that they were going to get sick. Okay? Think of that when you're thinking of nostalgia. Some of us are probably feeling a lot of nostalgia right now. Now, I want you to review the poems we've read today, and I want you to find 3 examples of Billie Joe or Daddy feeling nostalgic, okay? So either or. All right, Billie Joe or Daddy. And I want you to write the text evidence for them in your reading log. So go ahead, pause this video, and when you're ready to go, press play and move on. So pause and get ready to go. All right, you should have written down those 3 examples of where you see Daddy or Billy Joe feeling nostalgic. And so now let's look at this next question, and I want you to answer it. How would this stanza be written if Daddy were the speaker? My father stares at me while I sit across from him at the table, while I wash dishes in the basin, my back to him, the picked and festering bits of my hands in agony. He stares at me as I empty the wash water at the roots of Ma's apple trees. Now, again, you're going to rewrite this, if you were, think about how this might be rewritten if this was written from Daddy's perspective, okay? Think about what Daddy is seeing. So you could put for this one, where my father stares at me while I sit across from him at the table. You could say, I stare at Billy Joe while I sit across from her at the table, when I watch her wash dishes in the basin with her back to me, seeing her hands as she's working in agony. I stare at her as she empties the wash water at the roots of my beloved's apple tree. Do you get how it is? You just got to switch it around. It's not super hard to do. So go ahead and be thinking about that. And we're going to go and move on to our next thing. So I want you to follow the example of what I've just shown you. Sorry guys, my cat Daisy is trying to come and join the frame. I don't know if she'll actually join into it. But just like I did on that last slide where I took that kind of grouping from Outline by Dusk and I turned it into Daddy's point of view, I want you to do the same thing now with 3 stanzas from this. All right, I want you to do this on your own. Now this is, again, is going to be written in Daddy's point of view. Now stanzas, if you don't remember, are simply like the paragraphs, okay? They're the paragraphs of the poem. Now when you're writing this, here she is. When you're writing this, make sure that your capitalization, punctuation, and line endings are the same as what the author would have chosen. So if it's capitalized, sorry, my cat's kind of making this hard to concentrate, then make sure to capitalize it. If there's a comma, or if there's a dash, or if there's a period, make sure that you use it there. All right, and if the line ending, if it's like a long line ending, or if it ends after a long section, stop it there. If it's a little bit shorter, then stop it there, okay? But make sure that the length of the lines are matching up to what the author has done. All right, so go ahead, pause the video, write down your 3 stanzas, and then move on to the next slide. Congratulations, you have successfully finished Lesson 16, Empathize with a Character. Now, in this lesson, you have examined the speaker's tone and used it to understand her character. You've also written a poem from Daddy's point of view. Now, the empathy part really played into rewriting this poem from Daddy's point of view, because in order to this, remember, empathy means to understand or share another person's feelings. So in order to successfully write this, you really had to think about how Daddy was feeling in this section, Outlined by Dusk. And it's a little difficult, but I know you can do it. You're all smart enough to do it. Thank you again to Miss Deschamps for getting us started with these. I'm excited to kind of do a couple of videos, because remember, we're going to be flip-flopping on some of the videos. So I'll have 1 or 2 more before Miss Deschamps comes back on. So good luck. Make sure that you're all doing these, that you're keeping track with them. And whenever you write them down, after you're done writing them down, go to the Microsoft form that's in the description below. Okay, so it's right here, right below. And make sure that you type it in. That's going to let Miss Deschamps and myself keep up with everyone's work and make sure that everyone's on the right path. So thanks again for joining me today, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.